We're beginning Chapter 8. What do thousands of doctors on industry payroll do? We become doctors to help our patients, and some doctors do valuable work for the companies that might potentially benefit patients too. For example, as investigators in relevant trials. But most doctors on industry payroll don't. It's simply not possible for so many doctors to do a meaningful work for the companies of potential value for patients. The truth is that by far, most doctors assisted the companies in marketing their products. This becomes clear if we look at the 4,036 roles Danish doctors had in 2010. There were 1,626 investigators, which was the most common role. However, true progress in drug treatment is very rare. In 2000, Prescrier analyzed 109 new drugs or indications. 3 were considered a minor therapeutic breakthrough, 76 added nothing new, while 19 deemed to represent a possible public health risk. Others have estimated that 11% to 16% of new drugs represent a therapeutic gain. But that was with very generous definitions of what gain is. If the gain and the trials behind them were scrutinized more closely, there wouldn't be much left. I'll just show you table 8.1 instead of just rambling on. Pause and read thoroughly. 3, 2, 1, pause. Moving on. If a company developed a truly superior drug, it doesn't require many doctors to assist it in providing this 1 or 2 multinational trials. Since Denmark is so small, not more than 5 Danish doctors would need to participate to such an extent that they needed permission from their drug agency to collaborate with the company. But as there are additional relevant projects for a superior drug, let's be generous and say 50 doctors are needed to compare this with the 1,626 doctors with permission to be clinical investigators, which is 30 times as many. What are all these doctors doing? We actually know a good deal about this because of our foolish patent system and the unlimited powers of marketing. It is highly profitable to develop so-called Me Too drugs, which have a molecular structure similar to drugs already on the market. Or common diseases with a large market potential, more than 100 different drugs may have been developed within the same therapeutic class. For example, antihistamines. As these drugs are variations of known substances, one could argue that they aren't really new discoveries. In the same way, the development of a new set of bumpers for a Volvo doesn't make it a different car. It is very rare for Me Too drugs to represent any therapeutic advance, but very common that it looks as if they do. The industry uses 2 main tricks. One is to perform a lot of entirely superfluous and therefore, by definition, unethical, placebo-controlled trials long after the effect of the new drug has been proven. This may seem a foolish thing to do, but it isn't, as exemplified by the highly expensive triptans for treatment of migraine. The first such drug was sumatriptan from GlaxoSmithKline. There are at least 24 published trials with oral sumatriptan where the only competitor is placebo. The large effect compared with placebo was used to convince doctors to prescribe these modern drugs rather than the old ones. It is strange that this can work, but it does. Anything can be sold to a doctor, it seems. The ploy went on for many years after sumatriptan came on the market in 1991. In 2009, a researcher reported that Glaxo had omitted to publish several of its negative trials on sumatriptan. And finally, in 2011, after our societies had wasted loads of money on these drugs after 20 years, the Danish National Board of Health tried to roll the clock back, announcing that aspirin was equally effective as the triptans and should be preferred because of its much lower price. I'm sure this won't work. Nothing beats industry marketing, particularly not when it comes 20 years too late. As already explained, the other way the industry fools us into believing new drugs are better than the old ones is to manipulate the design, analysis, and reporting of head-to-head trials that compare two active drugs. Excuse me. Whether they have placebo or an active drug as a competitor, few industry trials provide anything of value for patients. In fact, they generally impact negatively on patients, as their purpose is to provide support for the marketing of expensive drugs that have nothing to offer and sometimes turn out later to have caused serious harms. Internal company documents obtained through litigation demonstrate why the drug industry performs clinical trials. Forget all the bullshit about helping patients. Pfizer has made it very clear and even speak of off-label marketing, which they call off-label data dissemination. Bullet point 1, Pfizer sponsored studies belonging to Pfizer, not to any individual. Bullet point number 2. Purpose of data is to support directly or indirectly marketing of our product. Example, through use in label enhancements and NDA, new drug application filings. Through publication for field force use. Through publications that can be utilized to support off-label data dissemination, and therefore commercial marketing medical need to be involved in all data dissemination efforts. It seems that at least 97% of the 1,626 Danish doctors who help the companies as investigators don't do valuable research, but help the companies with marketing. The worst of these studies are seeding trials, one of the darkest sides of doctors' collaboration with the drug industry. Seeding trials. Seeding trials usually have no scientific value and usually don't even have a control group. Kind of sounds like what they're doing with the vaccines right now. Yes, they got rid of the control group. The doctors are given a portion of the company's new drug and are asked to try it out on their patients and note how it goes. The assembled data are pretty useless and are rarely published. The real aim of seeding trials is to lure as many doctors as possible into using the new drug. The doctor gets a fee for each patient, and although the companies call it research, it has the character of bribery. A German survey found that 2/3 of such studies didn't even have a study plan or an aim for study, and only 19% mentioned anything about publication. The drugs being promoted in the seeding trials were 10 times as expensive, on average, than the drugs generally being used. When a German journalist exposed the corruption, the CEO of Novartis wrote to his employees that his company, in all respects, strictly lived up to the codes of honor Novartis had bound itself to follow. Bullshit on paper has the advantage that it doesn't stink, at least only indirectly. Few physicians would knowingly enroll their patients in a study that placed them at risk in order to provide a company with a marketing advantage. A few patients would agree to participate. Right. And few patients would agree to participate. Seeding trials can therefore occur only because the company doesn't disclose their true purpose to anyone. We need a societal consensus that it is immoral to deceive ethics committees and participants in this way about the true purpose of a trial. A hallmark of seeding trials is that they involve huge numbers of doctors who treat few patients each. The law varies in different countries, but seeding trials rarely require approval by a research ethics committee or a drug regulatory agency because they are not regarded as research, but ordinary use of an approved drug. The irony is total because at the same time, many doctors think they contribute to research. In contrast to ordinary clinical trials, seeding trials are usually run by marketing people and salespeople try to influence the prescribing practices while they collect the data in the doctor's offices. In 2006, Danish researchers documented that their participation in a seeding trial led to a significant increase in the use of the company's drug in their practices, even though the effect was much diluted, as only 11 of the 26 general practitioners recruited patients for the study. The rationale for the study was very thin: to compare an asthma drug with itself given in two different ways. In a non-blinded trial, AstraZeneca paid the doctors $800 for each patient. We have no idea how many doctors or patients were enrolled, as the study has never been published, although it appeared to have ended in 2002. I found an undated internal company report that mentioned 796 patients and that the data were on file. A PhD thesis revealed AstraZeneca's purpose with the study. AstraZeneca is very concerned with the production of clinical evidence, both as a means of making doctors aware of upcoming products and as a prerequisite for further commercial marketing. And in my view, it was much easier. In my view, it was a much easier way to get a number of GPs aboard instead of having to go out and convince them. An accompanying editorial noted that when a gift or gesture of any size is bestowed, it imposes on the recipient a sense of indebtedness. The obligation to directly reciprocate, whether or not the recipient is conscious of it, tends to influence behavior. Food, flattery, and friendship are powerful tools of persuasion, particularly when combined. A final point about research is worth noting: even when academic investigators perform so-called independent research on drugs, the drug industry tries to meddle with it. Internal documents that were never meant to become publicly known, but which were released through U.S. court proceedings, are revealing. An internal AstraZeneca email says that Lilly run a large and highly effective IIT investigator-initiated trials program. They offer significant financial support, but want control of the data in return. They're able to spin the same data in many different ways through an effective publications team. Negative data usually remains well hidden. BMS, Bristol Myers Squibb, investigator-initiated trials program is growing very fast in launched markets. The proposals are modified by Bristol Myers Squibb's strategic force is unlicensed indications. Janssen have a well-organized investigator-initiated trials program is growing very fast. Oh wait, Janssen have a well-organized investigator-initiated trials plan. No IIT data is allowed to be published without going through Janssen for approval, and communication is controlled by Janssen. High expectations are set on investigators who publish favorable results, but they are well rewarded for their involvement. They seem less concerned than Lilly about negative data reaching the public domain. It seems rather strange to me that companies can run investigator-initiated trials and even have programs for this, and if it's correct that Janssen rewards investigators who publish favorable results, it looks like corruption. Rentke opinion leader to give advice. No less than 1,160 Danish doctors were hired by the drug industry to give advice to one or more companies in a role described either as advisory board member or consultant. This huge number suggests that people working in the drug industry are either exceptionally dumb, as they seem to need advice every hour on the clock, or they are smart, as they buy doctors. Pharmaceutical marketing has provided the answer. The advisory process is one of the most powerful means of getting close to people and of influencing them. Not only does it help shape medical education overall, it can help in the process of evaluating how individuals can best be used, motivate them to want to work with you, and with subliminal selling of key messages ongoing all the while. The guide for marketers was even bold enough to call opinion leaders for trainees, though many of them are professors. Most of these consultancies can best be described as bribery, and the consultants as pseudo-consultants. In a criminal fraud case that was settled with ch8 Pharmaceuticals, the report described that the consultants never prepared reports or billed ch8 for their time. Further, the sales employees who nominated the doctors to attend the consulting programs typically had no discussions with the doctors regarding the consulting services to be provided. Consultancies very often lead to self-censorship. U.S. general practitioner John Abramson describes a flawed trial in the New England Journal of Medicine that recommended a particular statin, but the cost preventing one stroke was $1.2 million. When he asked a specialist to write a criticism of the trial with him, he declined the offer, explaining that he did some consulting for the drug companies. When I worked for AstraZeneca, we had only one important drug, Nexaprin, an arthritis drug, and we had a consultant who was a specialist in rheumatology. His annual honorarium corresponded to what I earned in 6 months. Year after year, he was paid this huge sum, and he didn't do much more than educate us for about 2 hours in rheumatology and go through brochures produced by our marketing department. He cannot have worked for more than 5 hours to earn what I earned after 900 hours of work. My experience fits well with what others have reported. Our consultant was positive toward our drug, and the marketing people must have felt they got more back than they paid. But how could they know? I had my doubts. Our rheumatologist was a very nice man, and he sometimes told us we used him too little, considering his honorarium. Whether he made the first contact and suggested himself as consultant, or whether we did, I cannot remember. But I do remember that influential opinion leaders sometimes used their power over the market to extort us, which we felt very badly about when criticizing the drug industry. We should remember that there are villains on both sides of the fence. It is attractive for industry to buy specialists, and particularly those the industry calls key opinion leaders, as they exert considerable influence on which drugs other specialists and general practitioners used. We combined the list of Danish doctors with permission to work for the drug industry with the authorization list from the Danish Medical Association to find which specialists were most often working for the industry. Table 8.2, and I will show that coming up, lists those specialties where more than one out of 5 doctors were involved. Unsurprisingly, specialties with highly expensive drugs and a large marketing potential came up on the list. For example, endocrinology, oncology, hematology, and cardiology. Why dermatology tops the list, I cannot say, but one reason could be that they use steroids a good deal, and many new patented steroids are very expensive, although they are not any better than the ones we have used for decades. Here's table 8.2. Pause. 3, 2, 1, pause. Done. An authoritarian survey showed that 1/4 of the specialists had been a member of the company's advisory board within the last year. Most of the specialists said they received less than $4,000 a year for their services, but other studies have reported that key opinion leaders may receive $50,000 European pounds a year to sit on a company's advisory board, or $400,000 for just 8 days of consulting. John Bell, Regis Professor of Medicine at Oxford University, received €322,450 in 2011 for his role on the board of directors as Roche. This editor of the BMJ wrote to Bell in 2012 and reminding him that Roche had not kept its promise of making unpublished Tamiflu studies available to Cochrane researchers. The Bell, as company director, was responsible for Roche's behavior, and that by refusing to release the data of enormous public interest, Bell had put Roche outside the circle of responsible pharmaceutical companies. Bell didn't respond other than by saying he had referred to letter to Roche. 4 of the biggest hip and knee implant companies doled out more than $800 million in 6,500 consulting agreements with doctors between 2002 and 2006. Big money also changes hands in Europe. Some hospital doctors can earn up to €90,000 from the industry for a conference, or €600,000 in consultancy fees. Internal company documents have shown that the advice the companies want from their thousands of consultants or advisory board members has little to do with research, but a lot to do with marketing. At a meeting with such doctors, a regional business director said, "We would like to develop a close business relationship with you. That is illegal in Denmark and should be banned in all countries, according to Danish law. An application to get permission to work for a company will generally be rejected if the work contributes to marketing. For example, writing marketing material, sales training, advice about company sales arguments, and writing leaflets for doctors that are sponsored by a drug company and which contains ads for the company's drug. I have no doubt that our rules are being circumvented and that the most doctors help the companies with their marketing." I have seen written examples of it and overheard doctors tell other doctors how funny it was when they participated in role plays and played difficult doctors while salespersons tried to sell the company's product. It's surprising doctors can be proud that they have participated in this. Next, we'll have a look at doctors as drug pushers. Rent a key opinion leader to educate. It is very dismaying to find academic psychiatrists that one of his hitherto respected supporting one drug on a Monday and another on Tuesday. I can think of a well-known British psychiatrist I met and I said, "How are you?" He said, "What day is it? I'm just working out what drug I'm supporting today." Robin Murray, professor of the Institute of Psychiatry, King's College, London. The third major category when Danish doctors work for the drug industry is lecturing. Close to 1,000 doctors had permission to give talks at industry-sponsored meetings or educational arrangements. Like the huge number of doctors who are investigators, as the many who give advice to companies, this number doesn't make sense until we learn what the doctors are used for. 1,000 doctors in a company as small as Denmark means one lecturing doctor for every 20 doctors. Since permission is not needed, if a doctor only lectures occasionally, most doctors give several lectures every year. Thus, an overwhelming amount of education is available for doctors, and in the United States, over 60% of continuing medical education, CME, is being paid for by drug companies. It is, of course, the generous honoraria that attracts such a large army of physicians, educators. A 2002 survey found that American psychiatrists were paid about $3,000 for a symposium lecture, and some earned as much as $10,000. The same year, there were 30 free symposia sponsored by a drug or device company at the American Heart Association meeting, and a prominent cardiologist bragged he made more than $100,000 at a single meeting for lecturing a symposia. Jerome Cassiere, former editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, heard repeatedly from his colleagues that doctors who tour the country for drug companies, changing their talks repeatedly to hawk the product of the companies sponsoring their talk, are called marketing whores. Similarly, doctors who work for multiple companies are called drug whores by drug reps. Such appointments are sometimes used as payback for participation in trials, which allows the doctors to say that they had no financial conflicts of interest while doing the trial. The drug industry routinely says it has no influence over the content of its courses, which is decided by the organizers, but such reassurances shouldn't be believed. The course content is biased, and the attendants favor the sponsors' drugs afterwards. Leaked documents show that even when the concept of education has been aggressively sold to general practitioners in brochures claiming that all content is independent of industry influence, the professional providers of medical education ask the drug companies to suggest speakers. Conversely, companies ask the providers to ensure that the speaker Conversely, companies ask the providers to ensure that the speaker positions the company's product appropriately. After the educational provider had accepted 2 doctors to speak at a seminar on women's health, Oregon, now part of Sharing Plow, which sells hormones, wrote back, I would like again to sincerely thank you for the political help in respect of orchestrating the favorable consideration of the proposed topic and speaker. The level of generosity also seems to matter. Platinum sponsors were routinely offered the chance to work with us to determine a speaker as the topic for the program. Amazingly, the drug industry represents Amazingly, the drug industry representative bodies, both in Australia and in the UK, which otherwise routinely deny everything that doesn't look too good for them, admitted that this is how they do business. Perhaps it is just too obvious that no matter how it's arranged, a doctor who doesn't deliver won't be asked out again. The medical director of the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry has admitted that whether it's called marketing, education, or research, it's all about marketing, and the companies evaluate the return on investments into their key opinion leaders. Companies go to great lengths to avoid wasting their money as they are sometimes whitewashed. Internal company documents have revealed that unrestricted educational grants may be directed for profit medical educational companies that arrange meetings where the drug company controls the speakers and the content where unapproved uses of drugs are dismissed, and which gain credit from U.S. accreditation from Education Council of Continuing Medical Education, although this is not permissible or even directly sponsored by the drug companies. In one such case, the medical education company became anxious after having seen the abstract for a talk to be presented at the American Diabetes Association annual meeting at a satellite symposium. The company requested an association annual meeting. The company requested a copy of the Shakespeare's. The company requested a copy of the speaker's slides for our review, and it developed pre-written questions to be planted in the audience immediately after the talk to counteract negative comments about the drug. The strategy worked as it led the speakers to address positive aspects of Neurontin. Practical Guide to Medical Education says that the potential product champions in the medical fraternity and critical to influential doctors, thinking that the key is to evaluate their view and to influence potential and to recruit them to specially designed relationships building activities and then provide them with a program of appropriate communications platforms. A medical education company stated, "Medical education is a powerful tool that we can deliver your message to key audiences and get hold of those audiences to take action that benefits your product." Brochures tell the same story. Development and management of key opinion leaders was a course in 2009 about identifying key opinion leaders, interacting with and developing with them, and strategic management of them. Top doctors as cute little puppies for the industry to raise. The first page of the brochure spoke about linking business with information and also informed that you could save 200 English pounds if you registered early. It took 5 more pages until the denominator. It took 2 more pages until the denominator was revealed. 1,299 English pounds for the 2-day course, and an additional 573 pounds and 85 cents if you couldn't live without seeing all the lectures again on a CD-ROM. This makes sense for a biologist like me. The drug industry parasites on our societies, and other parasites parasite on the parasites, just like nature. Drug reps are advised to work with key opinion leaders and then turn them into product champions, and also to find younger people who can be nurtured and have their profile raised so that they can become key opinion leaders. A bit like Hitler Jugend, so that they can go out and terrorize common sense among those who are not yet members of the party. Doctors are more effective salespeople than drug reps. A slideshow from Merck, which a Wall Street Journal got hold of, showing that from every dollar Merck invested in a lecture by a doctor, it got $3.66 back. Compared to only $1.96 if Merck's own salespeople held a lecture. The honoraria can be very large for doctors who are effective salespeople. Peter Vilmhurst, a British cardiologist and whistleblower who has exposed many examples of fraud in research involving complicit doctors and editors of specialty journals, wrote in 2000. Getting tired. One pharmaceutical company employs several eminent British cardiologists to lecture to other doctors around the country to promote the company's drugs. The cardiologists, known to company employees as the Roadshow, are each paid 3,000 to 5,000 UK pounds, plus traveling expenses for 1 hour, evening talk in the UK. Sometimes members of the road service have spoken fortnightly for the company. As a result, they receive is more money each year from the company than their annual salary from their hospital or university. Sometimes have admitted to me that they have kept their silence about adverse effects of drugs to avoid loss of lucrative research contracts with a manufacturing pharmaceutical company. Some opinion leaders involved in pharmaceutical research now command speaker fees that are so high that their engagements are negotiated by an agent. A doctor reported how generous Wyeth was when he told on how generous Wyeth was when he sold its SSRI venlafaxine Effexor to colleagues. We were all handled envelopes as we left the conference room. Inside were checks for $750. It was time for us to enjoy ourselves in the city. Receiving $750 checks for chatting with some doctors during a lunch break with such easy money that it left me giddy, like in detention. It was hard to give up. However, when this doctor said at a lecture that other drugs might be equally effective as Effexor, he was immediately visited by Wyeth's district manager, who asked him whether he had been sick. At the moment, the doctor's salesman decided that the lucrative career his lucrative career as an industry-sponsored speaker on top of his private practice was over. The drug companies received printouts tracking local doctors' prescriptions every week so that they could see to what extent their doctor's salesmen paid back. Pharmacies typically will not release doctors' names or data mining company Doctors won't release names to data mining companies, but they will release their Drug Enforcement Agency numbers, and the American Medical Association makes millions by allowing its licensed files of U.S. physicians to be matched up by the data mining companies with the agency numbers. In 2005, database product sales, including an unknown amount from licensing master file information, provided more than $44 million to the American Medical Association. That industry money corrupts the integrity patients expect of their doctors and of their organizations. Was also shown in 1964 when the U.S. Surgeon General released a report on smoking and health that condemned smoking. The American Medical Association was the only major health organism to withhold its endorsement of the report. It has only received a total of $18 million over 14 years from the tobacco industry. The bottom of academic prostitution occurs when doctors help companies with illegal off-label promotion activities that harm their patients. This should be a criminal offense. Indeed, off-label promotion is generally harmful, as we don't know whether such use of a drug leads to any benefit, whereas we know that any use of any drug for anything always leads to harm in some patients. A notorious example of off-label use of drugs that harmed hundreds of thousands of healthy people is the so-called hormone replacement therapy. The name legitimized the idea that hormones should be taken not only around menopause, but for the rest of the woman's lives. They were touted as being good for virtually anything, including preventing coronary heart disease, but when a randomized trial was ultimately performed, it turned out that hormones caused heart disease. Wyeth was secretly behind many of them initiatives. Wyeth was secretly behind many of the initiatives. For example, funded the book Feminine Power, which was also written by an American physician, and also funded several patient groups that looked as if they were independent. After hormones were found to be harmful, Novo Nordisk hired a German PR firm that sent letters to the doctors downplaying the harms. Shearing Genofarm and Oregon also stated massive marketing campaigns denigrating the findings and claimed that somehow they didn't apply in Germany. A professor sent a critical assessment of the trial to all gynecologists in Germany, and a 29% significantly increased risk of heart disease became no decrease in cardiovascular risk. The professor was paid by Big Pharma and hadn't written the misinformation himself. It was written by ch8. The misinformation worked. While sales of hormones plummeted in the United States, little happened in Germany. When I lectured specialists in training on these problems, a doctor told me that he belonged to a small specialty with only 3 professors. There were 2 main competing drug companies, and it was depressing for him to attend lectures by the 2 professors, as it was always easy to tell which company was currently their main benefactor. As it happened, these 2 professors were also accused of scientific misconduct, and I was involved with assessing the merits of both cases, which were highly interesting. But under Danish rules, I am not allowing to reveal more. I don't attend international congress that focus on particular disease areas, but I did not go to the annual AIDS Congress when I headed the Nordic Coordination Office for AIDS trials. I wondered why many of my colleagues presented slides that were so obviously not prepared by themselves but by a drug company. I couldn't understand why they hadn't at least made them look as if they were their own, particularly when they spoke about an industry-sponsored trial they had contributed to, where a more academic look would have instilled more confidence in their work. Slides with company logos or which smells company influence in other ways give the listeners a bad taste as if they were watching a commercial. I didn't know at the time that doctors collaborating with industry work with tied hands. I have no doubt about these doctors generally don't know or suppress any emerging feelings about it, that they are being used. When I have discussed with colleagues who lecture for the industry, they have typically argued that they believe the drugs they recommend to other doctors are good ones, and many even be used too little, and that they are therefore providing a good service to their colleagues. Whether this is rationalization or not, I cannot say, but what I can miss in this argumentation is how they got the idea in the first place that those drugs are good. Unfortunately, the doctors generally don't think that far, or it is to their advantage not to think. We think that support for such a meeting would be very profitable for a company with a worldwide interest in drugs targeting in these fields. We think that support for such a meeting would be very profitable for a company with a worldwide interest in drugs targeted in these fields. The impact of sponsorship will be held as the individuals invited for this workshop, being opinion leaders in their field, are influential with the regulatory agencies. Currently, we are seeking major sponsors to pledge support of US 5,000 and 10,000. These major sponsors will be given the opportunity to nominate participants and represent the industry's interest and to participate actively in the conference. CME ought to be the ultimate test of medicine's professionalism. What could be more central than physicians educating other physicians to improve the quality of care? Yet doctors hope to obtain something of value without paying the full price for it, and a variety of commercial predators take full advantage of these hopes to line their own pockets. The drug industry supplies 1/3 of the American Psychiatric Association's budget, and when interviewed, a spokesperson said that without this funding, instead of meeting with the Philadelphia Conversion Center, the members would be sitting at the basement at the YMCA. The reporter cleverly asked, "And what exactly is wrong with meeting in the basement at the YMCA? Apart from this, the psychiatrists were meeting in the basement at the YMCA. Apart from this, the psychiatrists are rich enough to pay for themselves." What has received little attention so far is the fact that by using most knowledgeable experts in the field, the drug industry also corrupts the peer review system. Journal editors look to experts to tell them whether a submitted research study has been done well. The experts on industry payroll tell them it is, and even when that's not the case. Many experts have shares in the companies and know perfectly well what it means for the company to have a trial published in one of our most prestigious journals. Industry liaisons may also mean that doctors fail to notify their regulators when a drug related death is suspected. For example, if they ask the company before they submit the report, some doctors prefer to send their report to the companies instead of the regulators because of their close relationship with them. The FDA and the EMA have found many cases where companies failed to send them on even when the patients have died. Damn. Well, that's it for chapter 8.